Brother Will.
Brother Rich, how you doing this morning, man?
I'm doing better than I deserve. No, I'm
Awesome.
I really am doing well. How about you guys?
We're doing great up here. It's just been a beautiful September. It's actually September's been nicer than June was. We were out for a little boat ride last evening when you texted, and it was 80 degrees yesterday. For up here is about 10 degrees above normal this time of year. So that's just been awesome. And so we're just enjoying the a beautiful fall, and as always for me, dreading winter.
Yeah. Winters, can be rough, but nowhere near what you guys experience up there.
Yeah, you guys deal with more of the ice and the
Mhm.
that stuff. We just get snow, and we don't get a lot of ice storms up here. Snow and cold.
Thank God.
So
Ice storms are no joke.
yes, that is true. You guys, that gives you a lot bigger chances for power outages, because when we get an ice storm, it definitely gets us just about every time. Most of our power lines up here are above ground, so
Hmm.
it's
Same here.
yeah, we get a big ice storm. It's a given. Power's going out. So I see we got a few folks jumping on already this morning. Who we got?
Oh, we got Guile over there in the Philippines. John Shriver in Yukon, Oklahoma. Guile says, "I love winter. I wonder what are winters like over in the
Yeah,
Philippines."
yeah, God, it's like the same but different there, brother. Because
Mhm.
first, you're always welcome to come visit up here in the land of Nanook, the North. But it ain't like your winter, brother.
No, I was there. Let's see, the latter part of January, and it was absolutely balmy and beautiful. So
Hmm.
let's
And there
see
would
here.
be the Philippines, not Wisconsin, and I can
No, no,
I can put that together pretty quick. So
I
because
was with a
I've read a certain book that raised my testosterone level.
whoa. What book was that?
Violence and Varietals by
Mm,
none
that's
other
right.
than Rich Brown.
The first ever military romance memoir for dudes.
That's it right there, brother.
If you haven't bought yourself a copy up on Violence and Varietals, you can check out the links and pick one up on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere you buy your books, or you can order it right off of therichbrown.com and get one autographed by your old pal Rich Brown. I love that hoodie you're wearing, Brother Will.
Yeah, man. This is the one you gave me, man. American Warrior Society. And I see some folks throwing some numbers in here on their like John Shriver's coin number 1919. What's that all about, man?
Hey, see, if you become a coin member of our self-preservation community, you get access to the training vault. You get access to medical, less lethal, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, unarmed and armed combatives, rifle, handgun, shotgun, go bag construction, edge weapons, you name it, everything to keep you and your family safer. Because I'm going to go down the coming apocalypse bingo card in here in just a minute, and you'll see.
And we don't need a free one in the center anymore.
No, no, you don't. No,
Yep.
not required at all.
Yep. I want
Mark
to.
is
I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to bring up the second assassination Trump attempt on Trump yesterday, because I saw some footage of the golf course and how easy it was to gain access to that.
any if you plan and it's just you can do it. I mean, and that's
Sure.
when it first happened. I'm like, once a nation state gets involved and BlackRock stops screwing around with sending one or two little actors. I'm just joking, BlackRock. Don't come after me. I'm teasing.
That was
Satire.
Rich, not Will, that said that.
Exactly. But Mark is on from Australia. I don't know what the winters are like over there either. What does Kyle say?
Says he experienced the winter in Illinois. I'm sorry you were Illinois, brother. And in Tahoe and Japan. So yeah, you saw some real winter then. Don't have snow there in the Philippines. Most people here can only dream about it, and they just look inside the freezer. Yeah, I've had a few cousins that were born and raised California, and I got to be there one of the times. The first time they saw snow, we took them up in the mountains. That was really cool.
Yeah. Tahoe, man, that ain't no joke. We've got
Yeah.
one of our members lives in Tahoe, retired FBI. I won't say his name, but yeah, I mean, they get feet and feet and feet of
Hmm.
snow, and it's going to hang
Yeah.
around for a long time.
Yes.
Alan Kelly is on, man. Without much further ado,
Yep.
let's jump into it.
And I'll throw this out there. Alan, I saw your emails. Just it was honestly, it's been beautiful weather here. I haven't been dealing with emails very much, so I'll get back with you, brother. Fear Greed. Neutral. It's been bouncing around. Now September seasonally, just if you look at each September each year, they tend to be volatile. And I think some of that is the old Wall Street saying is sell in May and go away. And that isn't because summer is a bad time to be in the stock market. It's because they go to the Hamptons, don't you know? And so they come back in September and reevaluate the market and then start buying and selling based on that. And that still happens a lot. This has been in recent memory as low as 35 and as high as maybe 50 something, not quite into greed, but high neutral, if you will. The John says as him and me both as Illinois natives, state has gone in the wrong direction. You're not kidding there, brother. Elections have consequences, and Illinois is learning that the hard way. So the sentiment bounces around. Now we can also look at is an election year, and until there's a clear front runner for the presidential election, market sentiment tends to jump around because this person's winning and their tax policy is fill in the blank. And so the market either gets excited or depressed about that. So I would expect this to continue, this volatility in the market with a generally sideways grind, barring some outside thing happening, like maybe, somebody actually does get Trump next time. I really hope not for either one of them because our country doesn't need that. Something like that, or an oil shock or a banking crisis. Outside of that, between now and the election, I would expect the market to just chop sideways and sentiment to go all over the place. So probably going to be a big nothing burger between now and November, and then we'll see what happens there. So we certainly live in interesting times. So
we do. And on that topic,
yes,
let's take a look at where we're at here. I should not be here right now. I should be somewhere in Northern Ireland kicking back and watching this on the news, or maybe not. But I had to look at my personal circumstances because we're well over 10 points at this point. We're 17 points, and I'll kind of talk through that quickly. My dad just took a pretty significant fall here on the farm.
Sorry to hear that, brother.
Yeah, right? It was unbelievable, man, that he fell out in the driveway on the walk between his house and my house, and it looked like it had literally fallen off of a motorcycle 35 miles an hour. I don't know how you get that injured from. But anyway, he took a significant fall. We've been taking care of him. My daughter's pregnant. Wife has some health issues. May have to have another surgery this fall. So I'm here, and that's the bottom line. There's no. Everything was kind of prepped and ready to go, as you might imagine, for someone in our community. And I know that you and I and everybody watching takes preparedness pretty serious. So I was ready to go and had my stuff in order. And then I think my dad falling and my daughter's pregnancy just kind of like that was the end of it. But let's kind of catch up here. The point system is what it is. We've talked through a lot of this. I won't rehash too much of it, but you and I started kind of looking at this, obviously many, many years ago, but specifically this kind of a detailed analytical chart, I don't know, a year and a half ago.
Yeah, about that. I think that's when you came up with it.
Yeah. And it all kind of stemmed around the top one, the extreme MAGA Republican speech. I just thought that was so incendiary. And if you look at the Gettysburg Address and some of these other things, to me, I hope this stands forever as a testament to the divisiveness of that particular party. 45th or 46th president indicted would get 2 points. And of course, the 45th president, President Trump, was given 91 felony charges in 40 different jurisdictions. Gag orders, if they were imposed on him, of course, there were ultimately 3, but 2 of them were pretty narrow in scope. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said that Trump supporters may need to be formally deprogrammed. I thought that was unbelievable and somewhat unprecedented. Sentenced, 45th president, sentenced and or jailed would be 6 points. Of course, he has been sentenced. We're waiting. He hasn't been sentenced yet. And that was going to be before the election. Thank God they pushed that out.
Yep.
But that still could see him doing some time, which is unimaginable that we would do that. We talked about black swan events, of course, and then they try to disqualify him from state ballots. Again, really unheard of. And then 45th and 46th president, Speaker of the House assassination. President Trump, of course, has survived two presidential assassinations attempts in as many months.
Yes.
So if you are wondering where we're at on the end of times bingo card update, let's go through a couple of these. And like Will said, man, at the beginning, you don't need a free center anymore, guys.
No, you don't. In fact, might be going for that blackout where you get all of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead and like and hit that share button real quick, guys. And if you got some comments, throw it in. If I missed something, please throw it in there. I was putting this together rather quickly because I think we're living such bizarro times that any one of these things could dominate the news cycle, but they're just hitting like bang, 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 one after another. When you and I were growing up, Iran-Contra sucked the air out of the news cycle for at least a year. Reagan bombed Libya and the hell the world melted down. And, you know, that right now wouldn't be anything. Nothing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That would just be a little thing called Tuesday.
Exactly. So let's take a look at some of this stuff. Tony is on. Alan says prayers for your dad and family. Yeah. It's been crazy. Troy is on. TC Fuller is on. Dr. Fuller says, not in Ireland now. Life is what happens while you are busy making other plans. Sir John Lennon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ted is on.
One of my favorite ones, it's an old Hebrew saying, it says, if you want to give God a good laugh, tell him your plans.
Oh, great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, he's chuckling right now. I can tell you that. Like, oh, you had plans, Rich. Tell me about that.
I am a constant source of amusement for the father. So,
so let's run down some of these. Chinese spy balloon was allowed to traverse the United States coast to coast from Montana to South Carolina before the current administration decided to let's go ahead and take this thing out. Not know what the hell it might be on it, but we'll take we'll take our chances with our old pal. We got a doomsday clock at the highest level in history since the dropping of the bombs in Japan. Till today, it is now at the highest level of history because the Nobel laureates that man the doomsday clock says we've never been this close to nuclear annihilation. Probably nothing. 3 UFOs were shot down over the U.S. and Canadian airspace. We still don't know what they are. There's no gun camera film. We haven't had the pilots on television to talk about what they saw. It has been a complete media blackout. Once again, probably nothing. Russia has invaded Europe for the first time since World War II. The U.S. military is at its lowest numbers since before World War II. Israel is fighting a multi-front war with Hamas and Hezbollah, and Iran is potentially next. January 6th, there was an attack on the Capitol. I know that as a conservative, it doesn't make me feel good to say that, but we've got to call it what it was. It wasn't a peaceful, we're going to walk in there. It was an attack on the Capitol. Again, it was LARPing. Yeah, if they wanted to take it and they had enough AR-15s, it would have been a wrap. COVID-19 pandemic. The U.S. economy was shut down. We're still reeling from those effects. 46th president is ousted by a soft coup. Call it what you want. The guy was saying, tweeting, I am in the race for the long haul. And then a mysterious PDF gets released and he basically is in hiding now, unless he's wearing a Trump hat somewhere at some weird rally.
And to that, there's interviews out there with Nancy Pelosi, and she was on with Bill Maher, and he said something extent of thank you for not doing what you claim you didn't do, something like that. And they all had a good laugh about it. And she goes right up to the edge of saying, yeah, we forced him out.
Yeah, of course they did. But what does force him out look like? Is forcing him out, bringing Obama in, Chuck Schumer and Nancy and the Clintons and saying, look, brother, you need to do this for your country? Or is it, what do you mean something with my signature got released that I'm not going to run? What are you talking about?
Or was it, Angie, your son's up on how many federal charges?
Exactly.
How do you want that to go?
Yeah.
And how much do you want to get revealed in court about how high up those things go within the family?
Man, we're really dancing on conspiracy landmines this morning. I love it.
I'm telling you.
No tinfoil hat.
No tinfoil hat required for that one to be plausible.
Yeah. Tony says it was mostly peaceful. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't nothing like the city's burning down. Let's be clear about that.
Right. But look at the difference nobody would call that an attack on Racine, Wisconsin. That was, other than being fiery, it was mostly peaceful.
Exactly.
Which is great unless your neighborhood's on fire.
Yeah.
All right. What else? Yep.
Oh, the COVID pandemic. We talked about that. Vice president is now given the nomination by the DNC without a single vote. Probably nothing to do there. 35 trillion in debt, unserviceable without some sort of economic collapse.
Mhm.
It is. I mean, it's
Yep.
a math problem. We say it all the time. Now let's talk about the last one on the Armageddon bingo card here, and that is former POTUS of the United States, impeached twice, found guilty at a non-jury trial by an openly biased judge who levied a $355 million fine on Trump for civil fraud when in actuality it appears there was no crime committed, no victim, etc. Jury found him guilty on all 34 felony charges and a scheme to influence the 2016 election through a hush money payment illegally. Yeah, okay. Everybody's done it. Paula Jones got a big payday from the Clintons, and this is just part of what people do going back forever.
Yep.
We've talked about it. Corporations do this every single day. I've done it, so I guess get my felony charges ready. Survived two assassins.
Been meaning to talk to you about that actually. Maybe after the show.
I think I raid my house. And now he has survived 2 assassination attempts, and eventually they'll anyway, I'll come back to that one. Home raided by the DOJ, looking for classified documents that he had full power and authority to declassify. More trials and sentencing ahead for the former president. So once again, unprecedented times.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, they will not stop. If you think, even if he gets in office, brother, it ain't over.
No business. In fact, I think they'll double down on it because he will be, quote unquote, even more dangerous in their eyes as a lame duck.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Right. What does he have to lose then?
Yeah.
Right. So the only thing they can threaten him with then is his freedom.
Once again, I will remind everybody that Jefferson Davis, you and I did. I'm really proud of the Civil War show we did, Will. If you haven't watched that, please go back and watch it. I'm very pleased with how that turned out. But, Jefferson Davis, who was born and raised not far from where Lincoln was in Kentucky, and he ended up, was a Secretary of War, Mississippi congressman, I believe, and who ran the Confederacy and went to arms against the United States government and killed untold number of Union troops under his armies under his command, was given 2 years of house arrest and ultimately allowed to go, because I think Andrew Johnson and others realized to go after him and other Confederate officers would just tear the country to pieces. Mm-hmm. But we don't see that now. We see them like, we are going to jail this guy. We're going to destroy him. And we don't give a damn what happens to the nation. Yep.
And I'd throw out there first that I'm proud of that show, but you did all the heavy lifting on that show. I was the cymbal banging monkey on that one. You brought up with Jefferson Davis and President Johnson back then. It just made me think about this. Back then, they were trying to preserve the Union. Are they now? Or is it just the establishment? And I think that's why Trump was so hated by both sides. Yeah, and he brought some of it on himself. I mean, put down the stupid Twitter, okay? Mm-hmm. But I think if you look at the Republicans who really went after him when he was in office, it was the establishment. They've got their game they're playing up there, and he was a threat to that, is a threat to that. And I think that's the difference. Back then, they were trying to preserve the Union. Now, the Union is secondary. It's just a means to an end for that class.
Yeah, that regime. I read somewhere, I should have put this in the Civil War show. Do you know how many Lincoln either jailed or shut down over 300 newspapers that were speaking out against what he was doing, calling it tyrannical? And you know how many Jefferson Davis shut down?
I'm going to guess zero.
Zero. As I've said before, Lincoln was a tyrant, call it what it is. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so Jefferson Davis is having to contend with the Charleston Mercury and the Richmond Courier, I think it was, that were just, what's he doing up there in the capital of Richmond? He doesn't know what he's doing, and took no action against him. When he's got, but Lincoln chose to silence the First Amendment. So my point of saying this, some of this stuff isn't without precedence. I mean, they will definitely do this if they feel that level of threat. But let's get to some of the comments here. What does let me go back here. What does my brother Jeff say?
He just says, make sure I got my tinfoil hat near me for some of this stuff. Well, it's sitting right over there, but so far, I don't think I needed it for anything.
Now, Dr. Gordon Botson is on. Good morning, sir. Ted says seeking a way to discuss events, emerging threats without my political bias being revealed seems not impossible these days. Yeah,
It's difficult. We all look through that lens. It's something I have to check myself on regularly.
yeah. William Hollenbeck is on. Good morning. Mark Riddell says Trump is the toughest politician in the world. I don't know how he does it. I really don't. I would have bowed out a long time ago and said, "Hey, let me go in peace." What does Dr. Fuller say?
It says the more he, meaning Trump, gets charged in office, the fewer resources he has to put towards actually running the country. And to that end, then the establishment gets what they want because it's harder to change that. It also gives the propaganda wing something to talk about other than any successes he might have in righting the ship of state. Boy, spot on. There's a reason he's a doctor and we are not.
That is correct.
Yes.
Ted says Trump's 6 years older than me and he is the energizer elderly dude. I don't know how he does it.
Yeah.
It's impressive as hell. Think what you want about the guy.
True. Very true.
So did I miss anything, Will, in the end of time bingo card?
I don't think so. Although I will throw in there we are going to talk a little bit about service and the debt here in some of my slides. But also with a little different twist though. But the other one was the Russia invading Ukraine, the potential assassin yesterday. First wasn't very good because as it has been reported that we know it now, he stuck the rifle barrel out of a bush. Okay. That's 101 stuff right there. Right. And it was because he was ticked off that, about if Trump got reelected, then pulling resources from Ukraine was the motive I've heard so far.
Well, that's what it seems like. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. So, now who knows reality, but it all comes back together into one big witch's brew.
Yes, it does. You said something a minute ago, and I was going to comment on it, but I can't remember now. I'm having a senior moment here.
Yeah, it happens. More caffeine helps. So, all right, let's jump into this. The CEO of JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, warns the U.S. of economic fate worse than a recession. Quote, the worst outcome. And he's not talking about a depression, guys. He's talking about stagflation. Welcome to the 70s. This is the stat that got me. Interest payments due in October 2024 on the national debt now exceed the cost of both Medicare and the national defense budget.
Oh, God.
Yep.
And that's interest. That's not paying down the principal.
Doesn't pay anything down the principal. We don't pay down principal around here. Mm-hmm. We just add a principal. It's like me with credit cards in my 20s. And so national debt may contribute to further inflation on the horizon. Okay, now below that's my stuff. I forgot to make the box yellow below to delineate that. So sorry about that, guys. Mm-hmm. The way I'm reading this, I'm trying to be the optimistic twist on this is just in October, the interest payment is greater than Medicare national defense, not year to date. So I'm just going to take it as the 1 month. But let's talk a little bit here. My running theory at this point is that inflation will remain elevated. And I say that with quotes around it because I'm not talking about going back to 8 or 9%. I'm talking it'll be above the 2% target. Let's just generically call it 3%. And secondly, why J-Dog, Jerome Powell, when he calls me on my phone, it comes up as J-Dog. So that's how we refer to him. Why I think he's going to decrease interest rates anyway. The first thing is the establishment, which Jerome Powell is certainly part of, does not want a Trump reelection. And Jerome Powell does not like Trump. He's on record with that in his way. He's very subtle about it, but it's there. So inflation remaining elevated, it's going to be really hard to get that down because of the rate at which the government is borrowing money and then spending that to keep the best economy in the world afloat. So in the past, when the Federal Reserve would raise interest rates, that would tighten money supply, that would slow the economy. Well, what's been happening this time, because the rest of the world is also in pretty bad shape and had inflation, had all these other problems, investors wanted a safe haven. And the safest haven in the world right now is U.S. Treasuries. You're going to get paid, right? So the federal government figured out if they just issue more treasury bills and bonds, then that brings money into the federal coffers and they can spend it. So this time around, the quantitative tightening and increasing of interest rates has not had the same effect that it did in the past, because in the past, the government spending was not growing on this parabolic arc at the same time that was happening. The government would pull back on spending and the Federal Reserve would raise interest rates. This time, the Federal Reserve raised interest rates and the federal government spent more money, an accelerated amount of money, which is why we talk about the national debt. So that's the yin and the yang of now versus in the past. But people are stuck in that past thinking of how that worked. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So as long as the government keeps pumping money out into infrastructure projects, which Lord knows our infrastructure in this country needs money spent on it. But the problem is we're adding that debt on. And then when that money hits the economy, now there's more money in the economy, too much money chasing too few goods, right? So this inflation is going to remain, in my opinion, elevated, meaning 3-ish. It'll probably bounce between 2.5 and maybe 3.1, somewhere in there for a period of time. And as you said on your slide, without some sort of economic shock. Okay. So I think the only way inflation is going to come down back to those heydays that we all didn't fully appreciate, me included, of running 1.5–2% inflation. It's going to take some sort of shock to get us back down there. We're probably going to have to go deflationary, at least for a short period of time, like we did in 2012, to get it back down there. Got to flush the system, and it's going to hurt. When the system flushes, it hurts. We've
been kicking the can forever, man. At some point, we're gonna have to take the frickin' pain.
Yep.
And can we talk about the word inflation? I heard something the other day, and I don't know if this is true, Will. Maybe you or if Gentili's on or some of the other economists that are watching the show today can explain this to me. But I heard that it used to mean inflation was inflated amount of currencies in the system, and that inflated amount of currency would mean a rise in prices relative to the devaluation of the dollar because of the currency. But now in the 1960s, I heard that it changed to now inflation just means a rise in prices without the underlying explanation as to why the prices are rising. And so it's a head fake over the last 60 years to just say inflation just means a rise in prices, normally measured by the CPI, Consumer Price Index. No. Why is it rising? Well, just because the prices are rising. Well, why is it rising? Oh, well, that's the way we used to measure. It's not relevant anymore. It just used to be because there's a lot of money chasing after the goods. And so, have you found that to be true? Have I been misled there?
No, I this is the first I've heard of that, but it also plays into the whole, they don't want the general population to understand why. And this is happening. We don't know why. We certainly didn't cause it, right? So what's Dr. Fuller say there?
It says 2.5 to 3% inflation rating is elevated. It's still pretty good, is it not? But here again, it's like this is freaking artificial, man. This is a wazi, a woozy, it's a fugazi. Once you have to go back to your chart, let me pull it back up here. Look at this. Interest payment due in October on the national debt now exceeds the cost of both Medicare and the net. This is insanity. This is unsustainable territory. Well, we're talking about shock. Are you kidding me? It's a Holocaust. It's coming.
From a number standpoint, I'm going to use Dr. Fuller's high in there, 3%. That's 50% above the target. And in a monetary system, from a central banker standpoint, Federal Reserve, European Central Bank, Bank of Japan, from their standpoint, they want inflation because that erodes debt away. And that's whether it's a national debt, a personal debt, or a corporate debt. Inflation over time reduces the effect of fixed interest rate debt. So that's why central bankers like inflation, but they like it low and predictable. Right now, it's not low, it's lower than it was. But there was also a time not too long ago when 3% inflation would have been an emergency. We need to do something before it gets out of hand. More to Dr. Fuller's point, if you do the math out over a 10-year period, the difference that happens to an economy at 3% inflation versus 2% inflation is
Mhm.
big, because just like our savings compound, so do debts.
Yeah.
And
And
that's the issue of that small number. And to Dr. Fuller's point, it's, you know, well, I mean, it's half a point. It's two and a half
yeah,
versus two. But you do that out over 10, 20, 30 years, you're talking real money.
yeah. And I'm an Alexander Hamilton fan, I guess. I think he did a lot of great things. And his view was, national debt, as long as it wasn't excessive, could be and would be a blessing to this country. Some kind of words to that effect. And that's the point, if it's not excessive.
Mhm.
But I think somewhere we've lost the idea that the excessive part, we're
Yeah.
well into the excessive part. Now we're
Yes.
way beyond the excessive point.
Yep.
And
For
I
sure.
get it. He's right. I mean, to carry some debt as a nation is a good thing. It shows that you
Hmm.
have the ability to borrow and repay money with interest.
Hmm.
But my God, Will, what are we
Yeah.
doing, man?
Yeah. So, and that's the with interest part is what we're going to get into on a slide later on. What's Ted have to say there?
Ted says, worst case in my view, recession that cuts demand, but inflation remains due to fiscal monetary action. Not sure the odds, but not zero.
Yep. And that is what you just described there, and not so many words. That is stagflation, which is
Yeah,
what
exactly.
Jamie Dimon is referring to, because it also, as those of us who are alive for the 70s remember, it deeply impacts the psyche of regular people,
Mhm.
because the stagflation is rising prices with a stagnating or maybe even a slightly contracting economy. And that
Mhm.
makes everybody's debts harder to service, makes people feel uncertain. So then they don't go out and borrow and spend and invest because you don't know what's coming. And I remember, I mean, it has affected me for a long time, still affects me to some extent now. Um, because growing up in the 70s, I saw friends' parents, lose their jobs. I
Oh,
grew
yeah.
up in farm implement country in Illinois. So I remember, International Harvester and John Deere all having their struggles. This John Deere is laying people off again because of decreases in farm revenue. And they're talking all kinds of stuff there that we could go down a whole nother rabbit hole there.
Yeah.
So, yep. So, let's jump on Don's comment here before I start up on the new slide.
It's not just our country. Global debt is now almost 300% of global GDP. A world of debt of that magnitude is extremely unstable and volatile. And
Yes.
that's exactly right. It's not
Yep.
just us, but what did Dr. Michael Burry say? We're in like an everything bubble.
Yeah. And we are. Everything is in a bubble. And that comes back to the monetary policy.
Mm-hmm.
And back to your point, why are we in everything bubble? I don't know. It happens. No, it's because they've been printing money like it's going out of style since about 80 or 82. And it's accelerating. What was it I
Yes.
saw? Bush was I believe W. Bush was the first president to double the national debt. And then Obama did it again. Trump would have done it again, but he was only a one-term president, not a two-term president. And Biden would have done it again if he would have been 8 years. And let's face it, if Kamala Harris gets elected, she will, if you want to put those 8 years together, which isn't a fair comparison overall, but she'll do it again.
Yeah.
So,
And I blame Bush for a lot of this stuff. And I get it.
oh yeah, yep,
He's got the GWAT, he's got some other things going, but my God, the expansion of government, the overreach of the government,
yep,
and running up the tally, my God. And of course, you had Dick Cheney going, hey, deficits don't matter.
yep, yep. So, um, let's see what Dr. Fuller says here, because it's brings up a good point. Oh, you muted. You muted.
Can you hear me now?
Ah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I bumped my microphone and it went down. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
Dr. Fuller says, so let's speculate on the thinking of those in charge of our national spending. They keep borrowing and keep spending. It all keeps going up. Are they just kicking the fiscal can down the road, perpetually keeping it landing until they are out of the office? Is this sustainable functionally forever? What is going to force the bubble to pop, or can they just do this forever?
Okay. If you can bring that comment back up because my memory is not what it once was. Thanks. So the first thing that came to mind as you were reading his comment was, um, so let's speculate on the thinking. Okay. Politicians and thinking don't always go together. Um, but can they keep borrowing and keep spending? Yes, they can forever until we've got $312 trillion in national debt. As long as people keep buying the debt and the population of the world, and most specifically the United States, keeps the faith in the currency. That's
What
it.
if people stop buying it and it's just we're buying our own stupid debt?
Even then, that can continue on for a while because it takes a while for the whole world to kind of figure out what's happening. But for people to stop buying our debt, there has to be a better debt to go buy. That's
Well,
just
they
what it
did
comes
that
down
with,
to.
I mean, I would love to look at the economics of the late Roman Empire and go, okay, once you devalue the denarius to it's just a piece of tin, there's no
Mhm.
silver in it anymore. Where did they put their money? You know, I mean,
I don't know.
I don't
That's a good
either.
question. Now, let's look at the last reserve currency before the US dollar was the British pound.
Mhm.
And what did it take for people to lose faith in the British pound? World War II.
Yeah.
And all the spending that really was started in World War One and went through World War II is what did that. So until there's a better alternative, it's going to be the US dollar. That's just
And,
all there is to
okay.
it.
Okay.
So,
Let's go back one then. So
okay.
on my Armageddon bingo card, one of the things I
Mhm.
did not have on there, I'm just realizing now, is the debacle of us pulling out of Afghanistan and leaving tens
Mhm.
of billions of dollars in national treasure on the ground
Mhm.
for our enemies to take.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's
Standard
something.
military tactic, right?
No,
Oh, really? Okay. Wow. Okay.
yeah, it'd be cheaper, sure.
Yeah. Well, there's that, and then we're still sending them. What is it? $40 million a week.
Yeah.
You know.
Hey, are
So
you perfect? Are you
no,
perfect?
no, I'm not. No, I'm a legend in my own mind, though.
Did I tell you
Um,
that that's what me and my son do anytime something
yeah, yeah,
obscene comes, it's like, my God, can you believe they're doing this? He'll just
yep,
look at me and go, Dad, are you perfect?
yep. So continuing with Dr. Fuller's comment there, he says, "Are they all just kicking the fiscal can down the road, perpetually keeping it from landing until they are out of office?" Yes.
Mhm.
And to that end, before Biden dropped out of the race, it was him, it was Pelosi, it was Schumer, it was all of them, and I'm sure some on the right as well. I just didn't see those interviews when they're like, "Well, this is how the system works,"
Mhm.
you know. And let's face it, to their defense, I mean, they're all in their 70s and 80s, and they can look back and go, "I've been here 40 years. This is how the system works."
Mhm.
And it keeps working despite everybody saying it's going to fall apart. So history is on their side that it has kept working. Just all there is to it. It's a bad thing. It is what it is, right? They're right. The system keeps working.
Okay, I'm going to go back to our Civil War conversation.
Uh-huh.
And line and column warfare kept working, kept working, kept working until the technology made it a meat grinder, right?
Yep.
Russian tactics kept working until the Ukrainian introduced these damn drones, and
Hmm.
now it's a catastrophe. So technology with AI and some of the other things that are coming down the road here
Yep.
may prove to make this untenable.
Well, and to Dr. Fuller's first comment there, the is this sustainable functionally forever? Yes, until it isn't. And what's
Mhm.
going to change it? There has to be something else that comes along that's better than the US dollar. And right now, honestly, I don't see anything on the horizon that'll do that. It isn't going to be the Chinese. It isn't going to be the European Central Bank. Could it be BRICS? I don't think that would take over for the US dollar because China is the main player there and nobody's going to trust China.
Mhm.
However, it doesn't have to completely replace like we replaced the British pound. It just has to take a big enough bite out of it to where we can't just print endlessly because somebody's going to buy the treasury bonds.
Yeah.
Was that percentage? I don't know. I have no idea, but it's something to watch in a trend. And then he goes on to ask, what is going to force the bubble to pop? I don't know. Something. Don't
Yeah.
know what it is.
Tony says
Can
it didn't work in 29, did it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And there was one major difference in 29, and that was that there was a competing currency to the US dollar here in the United States. Gold was also legal tender, which is why they raised interest rates when the Great Depression started, because people were cashing in their dollars for gold and they had to stop that. And the way to stop that is to make holding dollars a good move financially. And they did that by raising interest rates, which of course made it into the Great Depression. So,
Well, and again, they 1933 Gold Confiscation Act, and they're going to hit charges of treason if you keep more than, I don't know, 1 ounce of gold or whatever the thing was. So it wasn't just like, yeah, we're going to make it more attractive to get in. No, I'm going to put you in prison for 10 years and call you a traitor to this country for having some gold. We want you to have dollars. So we've seen this kind of crap before. Let's get some comments here before we move on. Tip is using flawed metrics. If GDP growth can keep pace, inflation, USA fools itself even longer.
Yes.
Dr. Fuller says, your simple yes/no answers are depressingly succinct. I may go start drinking now.
Hey, you can't drink all day if you don't start in the morning.
Man, brother, what's Don say?
The continuous refinancing of our debt with more debt in a revolving door cycle can't keep everyone fooled forever. Certainly a long time, but more and more financial experts are raising red flags and the commercial investors are getting nervous. Great point, because that's exactly what it is. It's using your Visa card to pay off your MasterCard and the MasterCard to pay off the Visa card. And that's what we've been doing for a long time. And I will push back a little bit. It says can't keep everyone fooled forever. And I will argue there's a lot of people who are no longer fooled like us, but yet I have money in the stock market. I have money in treasury bonds. I have money in real estate, right? Because until the system falls apart, that's the best place to have the money, because I've got to keep up with that 3% inflation. Otherwise, I'm losing purchasing power. But I try to limit my, not financial advice, I try not to put too much money into illiquid investments like real estate, something I can't get rid of with a couple of mouse clicks, even if I lose 10, 15% if something starts going crazy.
Yeah.
So
my good friend Michael Gentili says the fallacy of following a trend is that it works right up until the time it doesn't. I mean, look at Weimar Germany, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, everything was going swimmingly until it wasn't.
Yep, for sure. So, all right. So, and to that end, this is one of those articles, you read this on Yahoo Finance and you go, oh, wow, okay, big deal. Well, unless the person understands some of these other things we're talking about. So the Federal Reserve backpedals and unveils a scaled back proposal for bank capital requirements. So they were going to require banks to hold more reserves so they could be healthier in a downturn and have some cushion to fall back on. So the Federal Reserve unveiled plans that would massively scale back a proposal to raise capital requirements for banks after politicians in the banking industry pushed back on the initial plan. I'm sure there were no campaign contributions there. Warning it would restrict lending and hurt the economy. Now, why would they worry about restricting lending in the best economy ever? Right? Because everything's a big fugazi right now, right? These businesses also need to be able to refinance. And a lot of businesses are screaming for rates to come down because they're coming up and having to refinance things, 5-year notes that they picked up in 2020, 2021. Those are coming due. You can see those on the horizon now, right? And a 5-year note for businesses, 5-year bond is very common, and they're going to have to refinance that at higher rates. And they're not happy about that, okay? Banks with assets between 100 billion and 250 billion. That's like your mid-sized banks, okay? Which were initially subject to stricter lending standards of the largest banks. So think about that. They were initial rule here. They were subject to stricter standards than the largest banks. Why is that? Large banks can give more contributions, I'm sure. That's me supposing. But so now these banks would also no longer be subject to the increases. Okay. So let's recall from our previous conversations, commercial real estate lending. Commercial real estate is in trouble, especially office stuff. Very few of your largest banks, your JP Morgan's, Bank of America, they have very little commercial real estate. It's a rounding error on their balance sheet. Okay, it's big numbers, but I think JP Morgan has something like $3.4 trillion under management. a couple hundred billion here or there ain't no big deal to them. But your local and regional banks are carrying the commercial real estate market. If they have to hold back more capital, then they don't have the flexibility to extend and pretend on these commercial real estate loans where they go, yeah, Rich, we know you can't make the payments, so we're just going to extend your loan out for another year at the 2% rate you got, 5% rate, whatever it is, back in 2020. So we're going to extend that for 2 more years, but you can sustain that, but you can't sustain it at the new 9% rate.
No.
Okay. And that little example is going to come back around on the national debt here in a few slides as well. So, so we need to look at this for what it is, and this is the bank saying we can't do this and keep lending. We can't hold these reserves and keep lending.
Well, I like you. Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard it that way before, but you said it so quickly and easily, extend and pretend, that evidently that's something the market kind of
that goes back to the first QEs after the housing crisis. Extend and pretend.
Really?
Yep. That was when that began. So it's a standard banking practice now, unfortunately, because it was actually, I read this first in Trump's book, The Art of the Deal. If you owe the bank $1 million, they own you. If you owe the bank enough money that if you go bankrupt, they go bankrupt, you own the bank.
Yeah, they'll extend and pretend all day long.
Absolutely. Self-preservation. Rule 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, so this is something to keep an eye on, because the regulators, the government, whatever word you want to use there, they want the banks to be able to lend as much as possible, because if the banks stop lending, everything grinds to a halt.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, if you look back at the Great Depression, like Tony brought up earlier, that's a lot of what happened. The banks stopped lending. And back then, of course, they could call loans at any time. They could call your home mortgage at any time. I believe it was with a 30-day notice. You need to pay this off. You got 30 days. And then when you couldn't, these other banks weren't lending, you lost your house, even though you could make the payments if you're still employed or had enough savings to go whatever period of time. So that is no longer the case. Banks cannot call loans as long as you're properly servicing the loan. All right. So we're getting into the meat of it here. We're going to talk about index funds. And I am very happy to say I learned a couple things doing the research for this. So let's talk about an index fund here. This is from Investopedia. The definition: an index fund is a type of mutual fund or exchange traded fund. Let's talk about that real quick. Mutual fund is there's a fund manager who will choose to, let's say you want to invest in technology. And so there's fund managers say, we're going to put 4% of this, 5% of this. And you can end up with however many investments across a area that fund specializes in. That'll all be laid out in the prospectus of the fund. Mutual funds trade once per day at market close.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then that morphed into, a number of years back, an exchange traded fund. Think a mutual fund, but it trades in real time. Like XLK is the ETF, exchange traded fund for technology. Mm-hmm. And you can buy and sell that XLK. XLF is financials. XLK, either one, you can buy and sell all day long like a stock. Buy, sell, versus just trading once at the end of the day. Okay. So I'm going to use the term ETF a lot because those get traded, I think, more often than mutual funds anymore outside of 401ks. So index fund or ETF tracks the performance of a market index, such as the S&P 500. Could also be the NASDAQ 100, the Russell 2000, so on and so forth. Okay. By holding the same stocks or bonds, and here's the key part, or a representative sample of them. And we're going to dig into that a little bit more here later. Okay.
XLK is kicking ass, by the way.
It is. Yes. Yep. And
financial advice.
Yep. And we will kind of dig into that a little bit, not directly, but I'll bring that together since you brought it up. The seismic shift and the rise of passive funds has come as they often convincingly outperform their actively managed peers. What is actively managed? This is a fund manager sitting down and saying, I'm going to buy Amazon, Nvidia, this, that, the other thing, versus buying the index. So and part of the reason
And he
for
can
this,
dump not only, I mean, yeah, he can also get rid of stuff. If he
yes,
sees Alphabet is underperforming, he can dump that and put in Meta in its place, right?
correct, absolutely. And there will be rules laid out in the prospectus for how often that can happen, the maximum amount that can be moved. So you may only be able to half his position. So if he's at a 10% position, he can only take that down to a 5% position within X number of days, trading days. They're going to be, it'll all be laid out in the prospectus. If you read one of those prospectuses, you'd be the first person to do that because nobody reads those things.
Well, yeah. If you're suffering from insomnia,
Yeah,
pick up
that'll
any
do it.
perspective.
Yep. So first thing you do, if you're going to read that, you make sure your desk is cleared out right in front of you. So when you fall asleep and your head hits, there isn't anything sharp there to run into. About 9 out of 10 actively managed funds didn't match the returns of the S&P 500 benchmark in the past 15 years.
Wow.
Past 15 years, this is a recently updated thing. Past 15 years would be 2009. Anything else happen about them?
That little thing called the GFC, right?
Yeah, you're right. Son of a gun. So this is where this is where the industry has gone. Okay, and there's some good reasons for it. Okay, and that is it's very tough to beat any index. And I say this with air quotes around it because the indexes are rigged. Okay, and by rigged, what I mean is they're capitalization weighted indexes. So in other words, as Apple becomes more valuable, it carries a higher weight in the S&P 500. Well, if it starts coming down, something else takes over, right? So I say rigged with air quotes because nobody's rigging it, but just the way it works, they're almost, as long as there isn't some huge economic shock, they're almost guaranteed to go up. Okay, so it is very hard to beat an index, especially when money keeps flowing into the market constantly, like it has in the last 15 years. Because the answer to everything is print more money. So as long as money is flowing out in the economy and people are putting money in their 401ks, which they should, and their IRAs, and then they get told, especially in most 401ks, they get told, here's what you can invest in. You've got 12 things, pick 12, pick two, whatever, right? So where's that money going to flow into? They're going to flow into these index funds because those also have the cheapest expenses, the lowest expenses, because nobody's actively managing them. If they're supposed to buy the S&P 500, then that fund will go in and buy the same stocks and bonds or a representative sample of them, which we'll talk about in a moment, because that or is very important and becoming more important. So it's like, well, you get the lowest expenses and the index just keeps going up. So yeah, it works.
Let's talk.
It works really good. And we're going to dig into some of the math on it.
Exactly. So I want to come to Don's comment because you kept saying the flow of money and it's all relying on the flow of money and the flow of money, aka the velocity of money, and that's what Don's talking about. It's the velocity of money moving through the system that makes everything look viable, not the money itself. What do you think about that?
Absolutely true. Let me just change my screen here so I can look at that. It's the velocity of the money moving through the system that makes everything look viable. So let's look at what happened during the pandemic. Like I'm talking like February to May of 2020. What happened to the flow of money? Went to basically zero.
Correct.
Right? Market went down 35%. Bang. What made it come back to the point? I think it was a 14% year return that year ish. Totally pulling that number out of an anatomically dark place, so it's probably wrong. But the market definitely went up in 2020. From January 1 to December 31, it went up. What happened? Lots of money flow. Where'd the money flow? It seeked a return.
But that was money printing, was it not?
It
A
was,
lot
but
of
it's
that.
still money. Still
Yeah.
money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Just
Good
because
point.
it's poorly created money doesn't make it not money, brother.
Good point. Uh,
So
Dr. Fuller says these are all the same reasons I've started to print my own money. It seems to work for the government. Will
absolutely.
Parker is on. And what does Dr. Fuller say?
The flow of money is precisely what allows any Ponzi scheme to function.
That
That's
comment
it.
right there. That comment.
And I will add, though, there's a second thing: faith.
Ooh, yeah. And we're floating on both right now. It's the Tinkerbell
Exactly.
effect. We
What
talked
did
about that
who was the big Ponzi scheme guy that got busted?
Madoff.
Madoff. Yeah,
Hmm.
people had faith in him, right?
Mhm.
That's
Well,
why it
why
worked.
wouldn't he? He was the president of the NASDAQ and
Yeah,
very,
people
very accomplished man.
people had faith in him, and the money flowed. Therefore, it worked.
Yeah.
Could that work on a larger scale? Sure can. So
Well, we talked about this too, man, that the economy really is our relationships to each other and our relationship to scarce resources. But which is mostly psychological. We put
mhm.
math to it, but it's really psychology.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Yeah. What
Nonsense
happened?
being the big problem.
What happened when the GFC hit? People lost faith in the system for a period of time. What brought it back? Lots of money floating around, and that
Yeah.
money always seeks a yield, right? So people found places to invest it, and
Was it
then
$600 billion of TARP, which now is laughable? I mean,
yeah. If it doesn't have a T at the end of the number now, don't even bother talking about it, right?
yeah. Will says the Fed is a Ponzi scheme. And what's Alan say?
Um, Another blimp that could affect the economy is the recent dry weather here in the mid-Atlantic states and the Ohio Valley have caused corn crops to be devastated. Very, very low yield, both in feed corn, silage, and produce corn, resulting in higher prices regionally for beef, pork, and chicken, and products that are produced with corn as an ingredient. And corn is an ingredient for everything.
Yes, it is.
So, yep. And I forget what this weather pattern is. They're talking about coming up this winter, La Nina, I think, or El Nino, whichever one it is. But they're talking about it's going to be warm and dry here in the Midwest and especially down through the corn producing areas, which could affect next year's harvest too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as I'm sure you've read and I've read a number of times. You know, it's odd to think about our entire society. It comes down to a few inches of topsoil and how much it rains.
Ain't that wild?
It is. So these are the listed advantages of using index funds. Um, these are pretty well known. The one we really want to dig into here is number two, rather. Market representation. They talk about a diversified investment that tracks overall market trends. And that's the way it started. Back when this started, if you bought an S&P 500 fund and you put $100 in there and 4% of that was Apple, then they went and bought $4 worth of Apple stock. Okay, that's how it worked back then. But if we go back to the previous slide and think about that, it was a representative sample now.
Mm-hmm.
So the definition has changed. And this is where we start to run into the possible, eventually danger. I will argue on a future slide a potential threat to all of our savings that are in these. Okay, on the way up, it works great, and we're going to dig into that on a slide here where I can explain my thoughts on that a little bit better. So, you guys can read these other ones for yourself. It's pretty straightforward. It's on Investopedia. Nothing real earth shattering there. Okay, jump forward there, brother.
One more.
Yeah. So another disadvantage has to do with what's called market cap weighting, which many index funds use. Let's talk about that. Market cap weighting. Market cap is market capitalization. So that's your number of shares outstanding times the share price gives you the market capitalization. Okay. So within the index, they market cap weight this. So Apple carries a lot higher weight in the S&P 500 or the QQQ, which is the NASDAQ 100. Apple carries a whole lot more weight than, I don't know, find somebody who's at the bottom, somebody who's a 1% hold versus a 9% hold in that, right? So that movement in, I'll talk about the NASDAQ, the move in NVIDIA stock has a lot more influence on the Qs, the QQQ, than say the movement of some technology company we've never heard of that is 0.5% of the Qs. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then what happens is, so let's say I'll use NVIDIA because we all know their stock's been skyrocketing for a few years here. If NVIDIA goes from a 5% position in the Qs to a 10% position in the Qs, then each move of NVIDIA becomes more important to that fund, to that NASDAQ number. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that works great on the way up, because then you also get guys like me that go, why should I buy on the Qs? I'll just buy NVIDIA.
All right.
Right. So what happens then is I go buy NVIDIA. You go buy NVIDIA. Alan Kelly goes and buys NVIDIA stock. Well, NVIDIA price goes up. That also drives the price of the Qs up. And people go, hey, my fund's doing great. Put another $1,000 in there. Well, that drives NVIDIA stock up just some small amount, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I go, hey, I'm making more money in my NVIDIA stock. Buy some more of that. And I'm doing better with NVIDIA stock than I would with the Qs. So I'm more concentrated, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also pretty active in this. I keep track of this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I also own some Qs as well, because I want that diversification with big air quotes around it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is where, on the way up, man, it's awesome. It's the self-licking ice cream cone. It's the 90-day no payments. It's all the wonderful things in life, right?
All right.
Yeah, that's on the way up. We'll talk about it on the way down. So go to the next one.
Okay.
So this is top left here, Invesco QQQ Trust. It's the Qs, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we think back to that other slide, one of the beauties is diversification, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is where market cap weighting comes in. Apple, you can see up there top, percent of assets, 9.15%. Microsoft 8.08. You guys can all read that off for yourselves there if you're watching. It goes down through NVIDIA, Broadcom, Amazon, Meta, Tesla, Costco, and then both the alphabets, the Google and the Goog.
Mm-hmm.
So you got 10 stocks. This is, and you read it right there, brother. Top 10 holdings is 49.83% of the Qs. So you got 10 stocks are half of your return.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound like diversification to you?
No.
Now, I'm not saying it should be equal weighted, because
Right.
that's then you miss out on a lot of potential gains. You're not fully invested in Apple, Microsoft, NVIDIA, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's this sense of diversification. People think they're diversified, when in reality, if they put $1,000 into the Qs, $500 goes into these 10 stocks, and these 10 stocks go up. And then Tony says, man, Microsoft's doing really well. I'm going to buy some more of that. And he buys just that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that drives the Qs up, like we were talking about. So it all feeds back in. It's this self-fulfilling prophecy on the way up. And you guys are probably already putting together how it's going to work on the way down. Okay.
Yeah. And
so let's
QQQ is up 792% since 1999 when it opened.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But let's think also about how when this goes down. Like here's this is
like
is
a rocket too.
Yep. So this is just year to date here, guys. So there's the Qs, which I goofed up my formatting on that. Sorry about that, guys. Still 3 Qs there, I promise. You can see how that is up a lot more than the blue line there, which is equal weight QQQ. Okay. Now an equal weight, there's an equal weight S&P fund, which is RSP, and there's equal weight Qs, which is QQQE. And the in the equal weight, if you put $1,000 into equal weight Qs, the $1,000 will be split equally among all 100 stocks. Okay. So one way we can measure how well the broad market is doing is look at in this case, the Qs versus the equal weight Qs. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And you'll see how the lines generally move together, But this goes back to my air quotes rigging of the index. You'll notice the Qs is always above the equal weight because there's always some inside the Qs or the SPY that aren't doing as well, right?
Mhm.
And this is quote unquote the rigging of market capitalization. And you'll notice it's always above it. And I went back and researched, and I thought for sure I was going to find some times where the Qs would be lower than the equal weight. And there isn't one time I found where that's the case. The Qs are always
Really?
above the equal weight. And that really surprised me. But then it started to make sense because this market capitalization weighting, it gets reordered. If Apple, let's just say Apple stock went to zero, well, then it would go down in the market cap and it would have less weight on the Qs. Right?
Yeah, and let's take Tony's comment here. He says, "Man, I should have paid more attention in English because all I hear is Charlie Brown's teacher going wah wah wah." And we probably should talk about why are two self-defense guys talking about QQQ and market capitalization. Can you enlighten us on that, Brother Will?
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought it up. So this is part of how we provide and protect our families, right? If your 401k becomes a 201k, that affects your family. That affects decisions you make on, getting training, right? That affects decisions you make on how you're running your household. Heck, let's face it, if it gets bad enough, it's going to affect how well you eat. You may eat poor quality foods. I'm not saying you're going to starve, you're just going to eat poor quality foods. That affects your health, right? That affects your ability to provide and protect for your family. It all ties together.
I'm in my mid-50s, and this is the first time we don't buy orange juice anymore because the price of orange juice is now over. I don't know what it is in Wisconsin. Here, it's over $8 a gallon or $8 a half gallon. I don't know how my wife measures that, but it's like it's kind of priced us out, and we're pretty comfortable here in the Brown family, and yet we've been priced out of freaking orange juice. So now I'm drinking apple juice. I mean, that's just a little bitty anecdotal thing, but again, it's like, as the economy moves, it's going to cost you to make some decisions. Maybe you don't buy 124 grain anymore. Maybe you buy 115 grain 9mm. I mean,
that's silly talk right there. Okay? But you're absolutely right. All these things play into it, and the way this, like something like this, works, this also has a psychological effect on you, me, and everybody else in the market. When the market's going up, we feel good about our future, right? When inflation's coming down, consumer sentiment goes up, which it just did. What people I don't think are seeing, like in the consumer sentiment number, is ask the folks at John Deere what their sentiment is about lower farm prices.
Oh yeah,
They're getting laid off like crazy. So we all want lower prices when it affects us at the grocery store, but none of us want lower prices when it affects our employer and therefore in fact affects us or affects our business.
Yeah, and as you were reading that, I was kind of reading Don's comments here. There's two, but they go together. If you will permit me here, the ETFs and their spinoff individual investments make for a very narrow market. The market performance driven by that narrowness forces actively managed funds to mimic many of their same holdings. Take any two growth funds and look at their top 10 holdings. You'll probably find that they hold many of the same companies. So how diversified are you really if you hold two or more of the same type funds? Not much.
Yep. So let's dig into that a little bit. So if you've got a growth fund, these are growth in the stock parlance is the company is in a growth mode. Okay. So NVIDIA right now, everybody knows that name, right? So NVIDIA is a growth company. They've been growing like crazy. So let's say you have a growth fund, whether that be an ETF or a mutual fund. The top 10 stocks for growth are going to be the same no matter who the fund manager is, right? And there's also a inherent bias towards the funds doing basically the same thing. So let's say Rich runs a growth fund and I run a growth fund and Don runs a growth fund. Well, if Don decides to go off the reservation a little bit and hold less NVIDIA stock than you and I do, and his fund doesn't perform well, Don gets a little thing called fired. Okay. And so the safest thing to do is to just mimic what everybody else is doing. Right. Because if you and I lose 5% that year, and Don lose 5%, we all stay employed because that's what
Mhm.
the market did, right? And it's the same thing for financial planners. And we know my opinion on most financial planners that as long as they do what the whole industry does, they stay employed by most people. Oh yeah, my 401k is a 201k, but so is my neighbor, so is my brother, so is my brother-in-law. So it's just what the market did, right? So
And
how
that
diversified
works
are we
until it
really? Say again.
I said that works until it doesn't.
Exactly.
Tony
So
says it's the only industry that buys at retail and sells at wholesale.
mm,
And
true story.
Dr. Watson says, seems like my Russian mother-in-law has the right idea to keeping her money in her mattress.
Yes and no, because I'll go all the way back to Dr. Fuller's comment about the difference between 2% and 3% inflation. The value of that money on the mattress buys a lot less after 10 years of 3% inflation than 10 years at 2% inflation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the inherent danger of holding cash at any time.
That's exactly right.
So that forces people into the market because otherwise you're losing purchasing power. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where I got an education. So um went back and looked. Your what do you want to call it? The magenta line there, the line on top, that's the
Mm-hmm.
Qs, and the blue line is your equal weight Qs. And you'll notice the Qs never go below the equal weight.
Weird.
Yeah, well, that's market capitalization at work. What I did notice in looking at this chart, though, is the difference between the lines and then the subsequent price action. That sounds really cool. I worked on that line most of the evening over a couple of cocktails. But in the first the spot there I got labeled number one, brother.
Mm-hmm.
That's 2018, 2019-ish. And you'll
Okay.
notice that there was a fairly significant gap compared to before that. If you look at where those lines start off at, they're pretty close. They track together, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then all of a sudden they start to widen out, meaning the market cap weighted, the Qs, is running well above the equal weight. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what can happen is, let's say, something you may have heard the last couple of years is within the S&P 500, there's 500 stocks. The S&P 7, meaning your Magnificent Seven, NVIDIA, Google, Apple, Amazon, Meta, and Google, I think I already said that. Anyway, there were 7 stocks that basically held the market up for quite a period of time in the S&P 500. And the S&P 493 was flat for a year, but the S&P 7 did so well that the S&P 500 was up, whatever it was that year, 12%. Okay. So it's somewhat rigged, but this is the part I learned. Look at the circle around number one there. Look at the distance between those two lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the way I'm interpreting that right now is the Qs, the cap weighted, got well above the equal weighted, right?
Mm-hmm.
They started off pretty even and that gap widens. That's market euphoria, right? And that's guys like me going on going, I'll just buy NVIDIA, Apple, Microsoft instead of buying the Qs. Why would I want the ones that are lagging behind?
Right.
I'm not getting any real diversification anyway because half my money goes in these 10 stocks.
Mm-hmm.
I might as well just shoot for the moon here because I track this stuff pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put all 100% of my money in those 10 stocks, the money that I'm going to put in that area. I'll put a whole 100% of those 10 stocks, and who cares about the other 90? They're not doing much anyway.
Right.
Right. Well, and that works great until the market starts going down.
Mm-hmm.
Because those 10 top stocks are going to go down more than the rest of the market. That's just the way it works in euphoria. And then it resets there in 2019. We had a little market blurb. That was the taper tantrum. That was the first time when Powell raised rates and Trump threatened to fire him. And he didn't raise rates by much. He went from 0 to like half a point. And the market had the term for it is they had the taper tantrum because they were tapering the easy money. And Jerome Powell capitulated to Trump after Trump threatened to fire him and lowered rates. And I think that's part of why Powell does not like Trump, right?
I'd
Because
say
he got publicly flogged into doing something he didn't want to do. And then if you look at about 2019 there, you can see it start to take off again. We can see both of them came down in 2020. And up until then, though, the lines were tracking pretty equally, right? They kind of reset during the shutdown of COVID. And then look at what happened, how it took off from mid 2020 until circle number 2 there in 2022. Look how the gap grew. So
Oh,
your
yeah.
cap weighted is going way above your equal weight. Euphoria. And then what happened in 2022? Market went down 30%, I think, in the NASDAQ ish. Okay.
Well,
Those
what was
lines kind of
driving that?
that was just inflation. When inflation hits and rates started coming up,
Hmm.
that's what drove the market going down in 2022. Okay, so now they kind of reset down. The lines get closer together. Now look at number 3. Look how far ahead the Qs
Jesus.
are from the equal weight. Yeah, that was the word I used, and I threw in a couple other ones as well.
Whoa.
Yeah, look at that overbought of the top however many stocks, 10 stocks basically in the NASDAQ and the Qs. What happens when those lines reset and get close back together?
Bro.
Yeah. This was an eye opener for me, guys. I followed this stuff pretty close, and this is the first time I'd ever brought up a chart comparing like this and looked at it. So I want to thank you because I never would have looked at this if we weren't doing this show.
Yeah, we had talked about doing an index fund show, so that you're finding yourself an hour into the show already, and I am blown away by that. I mean, this is recent memory. We're not talking. That chart doesn't go back to 1916. That goes back to 2016. And look at that.
Yeah, and look
Where
at
we are
just
now.
it from
My God.
2024. I mean, heck, look at 2023. If you imagine where January 1, 23 is there, look how that
Yeah.
gap is widened in what, a year and 9 months, 21 months.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yep. So this is, this is the spot we find ourselves in. So that tells me, so what this is really representing is market breadth. In other words, how wide is the good returns or bad returns in the market? So our example about the S&P 7 versus the S&P 493, that's a very narrow breadth. So very few companies were doing well and held up the entire S&P 500. What you'd really want to see in a really healthy economy, and this never happens literally, is you would want to see all the S&P 500 stocks go up and do well. It's never going to happen, but that would be the perfect breadth. That'd be 100% breadth, right? But when it gets narrower and narrower and narrower, what you have is a wide stock market. This, in the case of the 7 and the 493, the wide stock market was not doing well. It was 7 companies doing incredibly well that held everything up. But when a casual observer looks at that and goes, "Yeah, market's up, we're good." Well, you dig in there a little bit, maybe it's not so good, right? So that's what I think we're seeing right here. Is the only thing you'll notice here to the Ponzi scheme-ish comments we've had in other areas, and I'm not saying this is a Ponzi scheme. That's not my point. But if you look at each gap, you look at the gap at 1 and the gap at 2 and the gap at 3, they get wider and wider and wider, and each correction becomes more violent.
Exactly.
That's what I'm getting out of this.
Yeah.
Now, am I saying this is going to happen today, tomorrow? No, I have no clue when this is going to happen. But
let me ask you this, Will.
I got my finger hovering over the sell button.
Yes.
Much closer after observing this.
Not financial advice, but how often will you look at this? Will you make this part of your like fear and greed index kind of
this
weekly,
is going
monthly look?
Probably monthly, because this is going to move relatively slow. You're not going to see, I mean, each data point in this line is, I believe this was a 1 week chart. So, so each data point in this is 1 week. So this is not something that's going to move in a day or two. And honestly, not financial advice, I don't think we're going to see anything significant happen in the market between now and the election for sure.
I was going to say, yeah.
And again, hashtag not financial advice. I think we're looking at a recession next year either way, no matter who gets in office. If Trump gets in office, he's perfectly happy to have a recession because he can be like, well, it started under Biden, right? If Kamala gets in office, then she can be like, well, it's still a hangover from the Trump policies, up till 2020. And, it would have been worse if we hadn't had, they'll play the political game, right? But I think either side would be okay with having the inevitable recession after the election.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's this busy chart here?
Gosh, I was hoping you could tell me. Okay, so
Not a clue.
remember, so this is Tesla's stock chart.
Mhm.
Okay. Remember, we talked about cap weighted and how that can hide certain things. Now, Tesla is a top 10 holding in the Qs.
Mhm.
But if we go back to October 2021, this is October 25th when it peaked, to September 9th of this year, is now 40, call it 43%.
But it was overvalued from the jump, wasn't it? I mean,
Oh, it
even
was.
Elon
Yeah.
Musk was saying that. So, I mean,
Oh,
at
yeah,
some
for
point it
sure.
had to correct, didn't it?
Absolutely, it did.
Yeah.
But it got hidden in the Qs, and I say hidden with air quotes there, because
Ah.
of cap weighting. Because what happened to their market capitalization is the stock went down 43%.
Mm.
They went down in their ranking in both the Qs and the S&P 500. So as they go down, they become less weight and have less effect on a market capitalization index. Something else moved up and took its place.
Gotcha.
Okay. But it gets hidden within that. This is the danger to guys like me, because this is where we go hold the individual stock instead of the Qs, right?
Mhm.
And then this can happen. And right now, I mean, that 43% down is better than what it was, because it bottomed at what, call it 125 there, and it's back up to 230. Okay.
Yeah.
So at one point it was much worse than that. So I didn't cherry pick the worst time. Okay.
Mhm.
I just brought it out to modern day. But at one point there was probably down, zero went from 410 to 125. So at one point it was down 75%.
Yeah.
That'll leave a mark on your account.
What did Dr. Botson says? I think there was a stock split in there too. Is that
You're
correct?
absolutely right, Dr. Botson. This is adjusted for the split, because at its peak, it was about 1,200 a share, I think, ish.
Yeah.
So this is adjusted for the split, but great point. Yep, absolutely true.
Yeah. And I'd love Mark's question here, but I have a hard out in like 10 minutes. So I don't know
Okay.
do you have time to answer Mark's question here?
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that. I'm gonna suppose here, when it gets gated. Let me look at that. I'm gonna make a note right here, and we'll touch on that next week.
Okay, good.
I'm assuming that is when it's a closed fund where new money can't go in. That's an assumption. So,
Don says this spread makes me wonder why Trump even wants the job. When this market corrects, whoever's in the big chair is going to get blamed for it. But it
which
has to correct at some point, guys.
it has to. It has to. There's no two ways about it. And I'll be honest, this is where I'm not going to be. In many ways, I'm not going to like it. Okay, want to make that clear. But there's a little evil twin inside me, the little devil that sits on one shoulder that usually talks a lot louder. Kind of hoping Kamala gets in, because when this stuff falls apart, the right person or the right party should be taking blame for this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no kidding.
So, and I thought this was a great quote. This is John Wooden, legendary coach. Read about his leadership, guys. What Wooden would do when his seniors graduated, he would write them a personalized note. Okay, what would I give to have a note from somebody like Coach Wooden, right? What did you write to Bill Walton there, Rich?
He says, quote, "It's the things you learn after you know it all that count."
True story right there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a great book, the name of which escapes me right now. It's fictional. There's a coach at a small college, struggling, not doing well, and it's a leadership book. And he is visited in his dreams. You got to kind of go with it, by all these famous ex-coaches, and one of them is John Wooden. And he, basically they teach him how to be a good leader. And that is a great book. You got a couple minutes left here, brother?
Yeah, please.
I'm gonna look this up, because this is the other leadership book that I when my wife had her business still, this was one of the books that I would teach to the folks who worked for us. It was Extreme Ownership and this one. Give me a second here. I gotta try and find this on Amazon.
While you're doing that, Dr. Botson says Google says gated stocks limit redemptions.
Okay, so that's where we saw that most recently was BREIT, the Black and Rock Real Estate Investment Trust. They will say you can only take out only X percent of the total fund can come out per month or per quarter. So if we all put in, redemption requests, get our money out, however that works, whether it's everybody gets a certain percentage or it's first come, first served, otherwise you're just stuck.
Ooh.
Yep. And I am not.
Well, while you're looking that up, I'll get Will's comment too. President Trump isn't just confident he can do the job. President Trump knows he has the ability to do it, and the connections to smart folks. Hopefully, they are loyal to a strong nation. Johnny King says, late to the show, but good morning, gentlemen. Good morning, Johnny.
Good to have you, brother. So I can't find it right now. So I'll put it up in the coin members area. I'll try.
Can I circle back to American Warriors? You were telling me that there's it's a book where these lessons come to him in dreams from previous coaches.
Yeah.
There's another book like that. It's on the Marine Corps professional reading list called The Defense of Duffett's Drift.
Okay.
And it's about during the Boer War, and this corporal has to defend this piece of terrain that he's been given.
Okay.
And at night he dreams about how he does this and how it falls. And anyway, it's a good book on tactics at the small unit level, the Defense of Duffett's Drift. So if you're to circle back to our Warrior Foundation, it's a really good book if you want to understand some really good rudimentary tactical lessons. It's an easy read too, probably less than 100 pages.
Oh, cool. Yeah, definitely check that one out. So yeah, sorry guys, I can't track that title down right now. It's not coming back to me. So I'll track that down, put it up in the coin members area.
All right, that's all I got, my friend.
That's all I got, brother. Take us out.
Guys and gals out there in Warrior Nation, remember the fight is coming. You ready?